Harvest Harmonics, and welcome to the Profitable Farmer. Once again, I'm your host here, trying to help you put more money in your pocket and keep more of that money in your pocket, as opposed to giving it away to the government, all your vendors, everybody else, even me, to some degree. I actually had a conversation with a guy. He says, "Well, if I start with your product now, and what am I going to look like in the next 20 years? I'm going to have to rebuy your product every 2 years." I said, "Yeah, but." The challenge becomes on me because I have to make sure that you're staying profitable. If I increase my prices, I have to make sure that you're making more money on your product because I guarantee my product's always going to make more money for my farmer. So it was a very interesting conversation though, because as a vendor, as somebody who sells a product to farmers, it's sometimes kind of I don't know how you want to say that, in an adversarial kind of relationship, right? Where a farmer is trying to get a product at the least amount of money he can buy it for, and obviously the vendor is trying to hold their price so that they can be profitable as a business. Obviously, Harvest Harmonics, we want to be profitable so that we can expand into more and more countries and help more and more farmers. If we just make enough money to get by, we can't expand into more and more territories and help more and more farmers. So we have a mission for expansion also that involves making money and also being profitable as well. Now, if you look at profitability just in business, very simply, it's a very easy calculation. Make more in revenue than you spend on your costs, right? Any business, I don't care what kind of business you're in. I don't care if you're in car washing or farming or you're an oil baron or something like that. The idea is you have to make more money than your business spends, right? That's the idea, that you have to be profitable. But with farming, it's a really tricky proposition because farmers have a lot of different variables to contend with that maybe a normal business owner wouldn't. You have labor fluctuations right now. I mean, the labor cost is being really difficult, and sometimes it's hard to even find enough labor for agricultural work. So that's a big problem. Fuel costs just went up in the last year and a half, and that's of course affecting all businesses right now, and all businesses are having some kind of struggles with that because of when you get higher fuel costs, you have higher transportation costs. The goods and services that you come to rely on get more expensive because it costs more money to get it there. All these different factors. So fuel costs was actually one of the main driving forces of all of our inflation that we're seeing right now in 2022, and that started back in 2020 or 21 actually. When they started to shut down the oil pipelines and various other things, right? They shut down those local sources of oil, and that of course caused fuel costs to start skyrocketing. And that caused food prices and everything else to go up. And farmers are not necessarily seeing the difference in that cost. They're not necessarily making more revenue at the other end of it, because at the end of the day, farming is a commodity business, right? Now, one thing I want to kind of mention here is something that kind of makes me a little sad, but something that's an unfortunate reality, and that is, a lot of the people that are taking advantage of the Kyminasi Plant Booster, or the crop booster that we provide, is South American farmers, South American, and even into Central America too. And a lot of these farmers, I mean, we're talking hundreds of farmers, have jumped on board with this in South America, and they were already, because of labor cost differentials and other things, already very competitive with American markets, and they were already able to outcompete in some cases American farmers. But American farmers, at least in what I've seen so far, have been a lot more skeptical, a lot more risk averse, a lot more disinterested in trying new things, that kind of stuff. And because of that hesitancy, they are now starting to lag behind the South American farmers that jumped on board with this. So, I don't want that to happen. I want American farmers to actually make money. I want American farmers to be competitive with foreign markets as well. And with Kiminasi, you can do that. You can do that because our system helps reduce input costs. It helps reduce water usage. It helps reduce labor costs, and I'll get to that in a second. And it helps improve the quality and quantity of fruit and vegetables that you can produce on your farm. Now, if you haven't watched any of our shows, please watch our shows on Facebook. Please go to our website. Please go to YouTube. There's so many videos. I've done this show now for many months now, and I've walked you through the process, walked you through how it works, walked you through why we're able to get such amazing results. And I want to help you at the end of the day. So, guys, if you're watching this, please type your questions in the comments here. I want to actually answer some questions and make this interactive. So, if you're watching this and you're wondering how the Kyminasi Plant Booster can help you become more profitable on your farm, please let me know. down in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions. In the meantime, I want to just kind of walk you through um, the keynote. I think that's sometimes not thought about in terms of profitability. For various reasons, and I've been in marketing and sales for over 20 years in a variety of different industries. And one thing that I always see business owners kind of stumble on is that they tend to focus on one of two things, right? They tend to either focus on reducing their input cost to as little as possible, and I'll give you an example. I worked in the restaurant industry for a long time. I worked for Cisco Food Service. I worked for a company called Restaurant Depot. I've worked for several different companies in the restaurant industry. And restaurant owners would always try to reduce their costs. In fact, they would actually, come to me and say, okay, what is your price on meat this week? What is your price on steaks? What is your price on ground beef? What is your price on produce or whatever? They come to me and say, what is your lowest price you can give me on this produce, right? And then they would go and they would go to Sam's Club or other types of places like that, and they would buy all their paper goods because they can buy their paper goods cheaper. And they would go to another vendor and buy all the other products. They had a meat guy, a produce guy, a dry goods guy, a paper guy, and they still went and shopped at the store for some of the stuff. And it was just frustrating as a sales guy because I'm like, I gotta eat too. I gotta feed my family. But those types of guys, their whole focus is how do I get my cost down to zero? How do I get this down to where, my cost is as low as possible? And I would tell them, I said, look, yeah, you can do all this running around, you can do everything, but what if you just raise the cost of your Cokes by 50 cents? You think anybody's going to notice if you raised your Coke price by 50 cents? And the few people that took me up on that made so much more money just by raising the price of Cokes by 50 cents than they ever did by saving all their money by shopping all these different places. And it was kind of funny. And then you have other guys that are very much interested only in the top line revenue. How do I get the most amount of money for my product for what I'm producing, right? And they're the kinds of guys like you go to a steakhouse, right? And they're trying to figure out how can I charge $2 more for that steak instead of trying to reduce my cost. They want to see how much they can charge for something, right? And that was in the restaurant industry. With farmers, you hear it every day, like I want to increase yield, I want to increase yield, I want to increase yield. And some of these guys are telling me, I don't care how much something costs. I just want to know, does it increase the yield? Can I really get 23, 25, 100% increase in yield by using your product? If so, then I'm willing to pay for it. And those, ironically enough, were the first guys who started to jump on board with our system because, yes, our system's more expensive than a lot of fertilizers, but the yield increase is so much higher. It was so much different that they just realized, oh my God, I would be stupid not to buy this because I'm making so much more money on the top line revenue, right? And of course, profitability really is the balancing of those two factors. How can I increase my yield as much as possible while keeping my cost as small as possible? Because that differential is what actually changes. Now, I want to just briefly walk you through how our system can help a number of those different metrics to really improve not just one area, but all the different areas that factor into that profitability equation, right? So first of all, let's take a look at cost, okay? So right now, let's look at fertilizer cost. That's the elephant in the room here in 2022. We all know that fertilizer cost has jumped, it's tripled, it's quadrupled over the last year and a half, and the prices are going to stay high probably for the rest of this year, maybe into next year also. And so the cost of fertilizers is one of those things. Like what factors into the cost of fertilizer? Well, you have the transportation of fertilizers. Fertilizers are heavy. They're big. They're bulky. They're heavy. It's hard to get them from a manufacturer to your farm, right? The cost of fertilizer also has to do with what are those chemicals that they're using. If it's a liquid-based fertilizer, what chemicals are they using in that fertilizer? How healthy is that fertilizer, et cetera. But from our viewpoint, the crop booster improves fertilizer cost because we're able to make plants so much more efficient that they can use 30%, 40%, 50% less fertilizer. Now think about that. If you're using, let's say, a ton of fertilizers per acre and you got 100 acres, that means you're ordering 100 tons of fertilizer. You have to pay the transport cost to get that from the manufacturer, which might be 500 miles away to your farm, and you have to pay all that fuel surcharge. That may cost you $1,000 right there just to get it there, right? And then the cost of fertilizer because of these issues is making a huge difference. Now, one of the things about fertilizer that people don't know is one of the reasons why fertilizer is so going up. It's not just the fuel costs; it's also the fact that because the corn prices went up and the commodity prices went up this year, a lot of these corn farmers are spending more money or using more fertilizer because they want to bump that yield up so they can get more yield at a time when the cost of that yield is higher and benefits them because they know they can make that money back. But what if you had a system like ours that made your plants more efficient? You still got that bump in yield, but you didn't increase your cost of fertilizer. And that also will help reduce and level the playing field for everybody else. Because if all farmers, let's say all corn farmers, just out of curiosity, if all corn farmers use 20% less fertilizer, think of how many tons of fertilizer that would be across the whole board. That would save everybody a huge amount of fertilizer, and that would, of course, allow most farms to start dropping that price back down to normal levels again. So Kyminasi Crop Booster can actually help you reduce fertilizer costs, not just because we it doesn't require as much fertilizer, but because with that reduction of fertilizer use across the board, it's going to drive the prices back down to sustainable levels because it's not at a sustainable point right now. So that's one way we can help you on fertilizer costs. Let's take a look at pesticide costs. Now, with the Kyminasi Plant Booster, again, we're making that plant more efficient at generating energy. So, because of that, we're able to reduce the amount of pesticides that you use. When you use those pesticides, the herbicides, and those things, if we can make plants and soil healthy, you don't need as much of that stuff. The insects will avoid the treated fields, and you don't need as much of that stuff. Again, making the plants and the farm more efficient. That's going to reduce your cost there. Let's take a look at labor costs. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, if you're increasing yield, how are you reducing labor costs? Well, interestingly enough, in a lot of different types of crops, for example, strawberries and grapes and other things where they're having to manually pick these things, what the problem they run into is the fact that the plants don't have enough energy. There's so much energy fluctuations that you have to go through the same fields over and over and over again. There was a strawberry farmer that actually reported that they were getting, I think it was, I have to double check my presentation, but I think it was like 8 tons every 15 days. The Kyminasi Plant Booster increased their yield to 8 tons every 8 days. So basically, they were doubling their yield, which was a big in and of itself, especially with strawberries. It's a very high value crop. But if you look at the labor cost of that, they were still running people through those fields every day. It's just they were collecting twice as much. So their labor cost didn't dramatically increase to pick twice as many strawberries as they normally would, because normally they go through, they pick the red ones and they leave the green ones, right? They pick the red ones, and then they have to go back through that field in 2 or 3 days, and they go back, and now there's the ones that were too small and were not ripe. Now those ones are ripe. Now you can pick, and there's more coming up. So every 3 days they're hitting that field. Well, imagine if every 3 days they're hitting that field anyway, right? But now they're able to pick twice as many strawberries out of that field in that same time frame. That means you're doubling your yield without substantially affecting your labor costs. Maybe you have 10% more labor cost than you did originally, but you got 100% more yield. That's actually lowering your labor cost if you think about it, because the labor cost didn't change, but the yield did, and that dramatically increases your labor versus yield ratio on that thing. So you can actually reduce your labor cost per ton, let's say, by getting more tons in the same amount of time. So we're helping with labor costs too. So if you have that kind of issue, we can definitely help you. Now, if you can't find labor, there's not much I can do, but hopefully, we can maybe you can pay your guys a little bit more, and they'll want to come pick your farm first or something like that. With Kyminasi, you can afford to do that, right? Pay your labor a little bit more. And let's look at other costs. I mean, there's seed costs. Okay, so your seeds are producing plants, but if those plants are producing double the yield, again, your seed cost is a fixed cost. It's not increasing that much just by increasing your yield. Other types of costs, land costs, again, that's a fixed cost. It doesn't change. Energy costs, fuel costs. I mean, chances are you're not going to spend that much more energy or fuel by picking or harvesting twice as much if you're doing it in the same way you're normally doing it. So if you can keep your regular input costs flat or relatively flat, but you're doubling your yield, that not only, you have to look at that as not only increasing your top line revenue, but it's increasing that ratio of revenue to input costs. And that's going to make you a lot more profitable. Now, the other thing that we run into is quality. Now, if you're selling any kind of produce to your local market or direct to consumer, and you have that kind of business model, the quality of the Kyminasi Plant Booster plants is going to increase, and that's going to allow you to sell your product for more money. Now that is the easiest way to actually, if you're able to affect the price that you can get on your produce, that is the easiest way to increase profitability. And again, I use my analogy by increasing the cost of a Coke from $1.50 to $2, which most goers are not even going to notice. That still increase, but yet almost every restaurant goer would buy a Coke, right? I mean, it's a huge factor. That extra 50 cents per guest is literally enough to, I mean, drive, thousands of dollars revenue. They could pay 5 or 6 employees for just by raising their coke cost by 50 cents. So if you're in a situation where you're commanding a better price for your produce because your produce is higher quality, and I have several examples that we've given in other presentations where cherry growers are getting $1 more per kilogram, blueberry growers are getting more money for theirs, tomato growers are getting, more money for their tomatoes, strawberry growers are getting more money because they're bigger, they're juicier, they have higher bricks, plum growers getting higher bricks. I mean, we have a number of examples where we're increasing quality. And when you can give better quality, even at wholesale, I mean, you're having better quality. You get paid more for those grade A nuts than you do for a grade B or grade C nut. You get paid more for those big fat apples than you do for smaller apples usually. You get paid more for that super fancy, high quality super red apple versus a dollar color apple. I mean, you make more money on your quality than you normally would. So it behooves you to produce good quality as well, not just try to drive yield and have crap food that nobody wants to eat. And I'm not saying that anybody out there is growing bad food. I'm just saying if you can improve the quality of what you're already doing and get more of it, you're going to make a lot more money. So these are just some simple calculations. I know it's a lot more complicated than that. But one of the other factors, and this is probably one of the most important things that we don't always think about, is the Kyminasi Plant Booster will make plants a lot more resilient to weather fluctuations. So if you have heat wave, if you have droughts, if you have situations where it gets cold in the beginning or end of your season, I mean, all these different factors, insect damage, fungus problems, all these different things that can come and go during the course of a season, our system will make your plants a lot more resilient to that. And that will actually help save a lot of your crops where normally you might lose 20, 30% of your crops, you may only lose 5%. And that's a 15, 20% crop differential right there, just by reducing the loss that you would normally have with these different factors. So guys, if you want to be more profitable, the simple answer is give me a call. It's my job to help farmers become more profitable, become more efficient, and utilize the tools that we have so that you guys can become more efficient at what you're doing and become more profitable as well. So please give us a call, 727-324-6750. You can email us at service@harvestharmonics.com if you like a request for quote there, or you can, of course, go to our website at harvestharmonics.com and check out our case studies, check out the science behind our system, check out how it works, and of course, fill out a request for quote form. We'll be happy to work with you. I want to work with you guys very soon. I know summer's kind of coming up here. We're getting into our season here in 2022 up here in the north, and I want to help as many farmers as I can. So don't wait. Jump on board with this year. Even if you have a crop that's already you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get a crop. Let's energize your fields and energize your crops for this year so you get a good yield next year because it's going to really help. But for those of you guys who are just getting going with pumpkins and corn and wheat and these types of crops, let's jump on board now. We still have time to get you a system where you have the opportunity to get a really good yield this year, and I want to help you. So give me a call or send me an email or go to our website. Let's work together this year so that you become part of the future of farming today. Have a great day, guys, and we'll see you again soon.